Well, hello and welcome to Pick Up the Mic, Harvest Church's only official podcast. And I want to talk to everyone out there who gives us so much positive feedback. You guys who love us are loving the podcast. And I heard a lot of good feedback about our pastor, Kevin Bishop, who we thought the first half of his life was about as boring as you could get, but the second half of his life since he got saved was very exciting, and that's good. That's what we want our kids to have. We want our kids to have boring lives where they don't do anything to get themselves in jail or get another person pregnant until they get saved. And then they get saved, we want the action to start. So Kevin is a model person. That's what we want. Some people think, well, I want a good testimony, so I want to do a lot of bad things. That's just stupid. Be like Kevin. But secondly, I want to comment on people who say that this podcast is too long. There's some people who say this podcast is too long. Sunshine, do you ever hear any feedback like that?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes.
They said, dang, why do you guys talk so much? We could be more efficient. I know I could be more efficient talkers. So here's my advice to you if you think it's too long. 1, put us on double speed or 1.5 speed. I listen to a lot of podcasts that way. 2, we're probably not that interesting anyway. Who wants to listen to the whole thing? Just listen to the parts you want. And you could fast forward, you could skip it. And it's not a homework assignment. If you just want to listen to like a half hour and you think that was good, and then you think it's starting to drag, you can say, I'm not going to listen anymore. That's okay. There is, it could be that the best stuff is at the end, but that's okay. The reason why it's okay is because we're doing long podcasts on purpose. And the reason we're doing them on purpose is because it's what we enjoy. There's a cultural trend known as long-form podcasting. And we like that trend personally. Both of us take advantage of it and have for years, where people can have conversations. And the reason why long form is, say, different from a sermon or a Sunday school class or a classroom or a news presentation is all those are planned. And the beginning, the middle, and the end is all planned. And you want to get the content out. The goal of a long form is there is some planning. There's content planning and things done in preparation to some extent. But the goal is to get it into a conversational matter. Why? I don't know. But what I like about it, and you can say what you like about it, Will, is that in a conversational manner, often it'll take turns you don't expect. And people will think of things on the fly. Like I love listening to many podcasts by Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, or I like the PBD guys, the Patrick Bet-David. There's some Christians who do long form, not many, but we're one of them. We're one of the Christians who do long form, and we may be the only one. And for people who like that, cool. For people who say, well, it's too long for me, no sweat. It's we love you anyway, and if it's just not your cup of tea, we get that, and it doesn't hurt our feelings, provided you're not just making fun of us all the time, and that might hurt our feelings if our friends do that. That's okay, we get it. But that's what it is. Anything from you? I see you're busy looking at something. So, you're look at that nice software, Logos Bible software.
Yeah, I'm trying to plan for our Bible study section because I just have had a few different things stuck in my mind. No, I am absolutely a lover of long form content, but I admittedly know that I'm a weirdo. So, I was mowing my grass yesterday, listening to collegiate lectures on apologetics.
There you
I'm
go.
Getting real pumped up again about apologetics. I'm back in the apologetics groove.
Ready to fight. Now, this is not the subject we're going to talk about, but this is exactly the point. If this was something planned, we couldn't move. But I'm now interested. I have notes down here of a direction we're going, and we'll get there. But first, let me ask, what about apologetics are you most ready to fight about? You just want to fight. You're looking, because apologetics is looking for a fight. I don't care what you say. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So what is it you want to fight about?
I absolutely love presuppositional apologetics.
Now you just left everyone behind.
I know.
Wait, time out. Sunshine, what is presuppositional apologetics?
I don't know.
Now, see, she's a smart young lady, very smart young lady. She's our test. If she doesn't know,
I know, But everybody should know.
95% of the people out there don't know.
I know.
That's why we call him top shelf, Sunshine. He uses big words.
Yeah,
but he doesn't explain them.
Somebody criticized me recently for being top shelf.
Who did?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's a naysayer.
Okay.
No. I accept.
What is presuppositional?
I accept that nobody knows what it is, and I'm so passionate about it. I feel like every Christian should know what it is, and that's why I'm impassioned to get back to teaching everybody about presuppositional apologetics. And that is the idea that every thought system in the world, you've heard this term worldview.
Yes.
That you come to every situation with predetermined beliefs.
That's right.
With which you then judge everything else in the world by.
Got it.
There's no such thing as neutrality. And we live in a world where the wisdom of the age is when you go to college, you have to be a neutral, unbiased observer.
But you're not.
Let's look at the facts and determine if Christianity is true or if atheism is true. And that is impossible to do.
Indeed.
Every thought must be held captive by Christ. The beginning
I agree
of
with
knowledge,
that. What does that got to
wisdom.
do with apologetics?
It's a philosophy of apologetics. Not all apologists, not even all good Christian Orthodox apologists believe that is the right approach to apologetics. And
well,
I think
how is
wrong.
that an approach to apologetics?
There are different approaches to apologetics. Classical apologetics, so if you think of a very famous apologist, like I'm a big fan of R.C. Sproul.
Yes.
He is actually not a proponent of or fan of presuppositional apologetics. He's what's called a classical apologist. And the thing that they take for granted, which I think is where they misstep, is they start with human reason as a given, without any explanation as to why human reason is reliable, why you can know anything reliably. Like they take a bunch of things for granted that I think are only explainable, rooted in God.
So they take a lot of things presuppositionally.
They take a lot of things presuppositionally. And then
what's the difference between that and you?
I think in order for any of your belief structures to not be arbitrary or to have meaning, to be rooted in meaning at all, that you have to start with the belief that there is a God, that the one true living God is God, and only in the Christian scheme does anything else make sense. Do you even have the ability to think in some sort of rational way, to know things reliably? Otherwise, I don't think you can actually claim to know anything.
Isn't that... So your presupposition is there's a God.
Yeah, I think everybody has presuppositions. I'm just willing to say I have them, and these are them. And with these, everything makes sense. And if you cast these out, nothing you say makes sense in your philosophical scheme.
All right, thank you for starting that out.
If that excites you at all.
Listen, I see...
Heads up, we're going to talk about it.
I see the passion, and I think passion is interesting. But I also think what you just said, probably, if it wasn't said passionately, interests nobody. Because all you said is R.C. Sproul believes in reason and you believe in God, and you both end up together. Now, I am not saying what you're saying doesn't matter or can't be made, here's a good word, salient to the hearer. which means they think it's valuable and important to what they're thinking. But there's a few steps. So we're not going to develop them now, but I will throw in, I find that very interesting personally, but only because of things I've already learned in the past. Because I had to sit through classes on these sorts of things in seminary. And otherwise, I would say, who cares? And so if you're out there saying about what he said, who cares? That's fine. The burden of proof is on him when it's ready for him to teach it, to tell you why any of that even matters. But
and I would say if you're in high school,
you'll be a better thinker if you think it through.
You will be a much more proficient Christian thinker if you spend some time learning this stuff.
Yes. Okay. We'll see. There you go. So
there you go. There's your promotion. That's your promo.
So when are you going to do this? Are you going to have a class or something?
Yeah, I'm tossing around the fall in my head, and
like you don't have enough to do.
fall of 25.
You don't have enough to do.
Maybe winter of 26.
This
maybe
is
after the
proof
holidays 26.
of the old saying that a man finds time for what's important to him. Everyone says, I don't have time to go to church. It's because you don't want to. I don't have time to read the Bible. It's because you don't want to. I don't have time to do church things. It's because you don't want to. That's really always the truth.
I don't have time to do this stinking podcast.
But you want to. And a man finds time for what he wants to do. If you never believe that, take a busy man who lives single and alone and have him fall in love. And all of a sudden, the guy who has no time has nothing but time for the beloved. And then he realizes if you want to save time, marry the doggone girl. Now, let's get back to where we're going. I want to talk about something cultural that I think is a window in something very large. But I want to bring it down into the application of the church. And so this is going to be familiar news, I think, to anyone listening by this time. Now, it's not familiar news to Top Shelf Will over here because he just found out about it today.
Because I'm so busy. I don't watch the news anymore.
But the rest of you know that in Los Angeles, and by the way, this is normally about a week delayed. For all I know, Los Angeles has completely been burned to nothing by the day you hear this. But as we sit here, it's been several days of rioting in Los Angeles over ICE raids. Now, these raids...
I'm going to ask Rock for an executive summary. Get me up to speed.
There you go. These raids, there's a story behind them, and the story's being told... in different ways. So without me first telling you the story, let's see, what do I have here? We got a few videos. If we just, I think have, I know. Show the very last video that I sent you if you could. And let's show that in full, and we'll stop it if we want to talk. This is ABC News up to this day, or yesterday, I'm not sure which, I think probably last night, telling the story of what happened. And the reason I want to tell you this isn't just to get you in on the story, but to get you into the very next idea, and that is that there's gaslighting going on. So go ahead and play that whenever you are ready, Miss Sunshine.
Tensions are escalating in Los Angeles after protests against immigration and customs enforcement gripped the city. As protesters clashed with law enforcement officers, blocking roads, vandalizing, and setting cars on fire, President Donald Trump deployed National Guard troops despite California Governor Gavin Newsom's objections.
You have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it.
Here is what we know so far about how the chaos unraveled.
Listen closely.
June 6, Friday. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents were carrying out a series of immigration sweeps across Southern California.
Stop right there.
Federal agent.
They just said that ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, were carrying out a number of immigration sweeps. And they're going to show a Home Depot. Just from that, what do you think they mean, Will?
That they're going into some place and asking for everybody's papers.
Good. Okay, keep playing.
Right, that's what a sweep implies.
Yes,
is that like
it's not. That's
coming
exactly.
in and I say, let me see your ID. Let me see your ID. Let me see your ID.
Exactly. That's what it sounds like. They're going to go to Home Depot and find all the Mexicans and say, "Show me your ID."
Like we're in the ghettos of Germany. You can't be out on the street without your papers.
That's
let me
right.
see your papers.
Show me your papers.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Ghetto meaning Jewish.
After people in a parking lot of a Home Depot in Westlake started circulating. Around 3 p.m. local time, a crowd of dozens gathered in the Fashion District near downtown Los Angeles after ICE agents appeared at an apparel manufacturer there. Video shows what appears to be ICE agents loading at least 2 white, unmarked vehicles with people in handcuffs. Crowds gather around the vehicles. Some are seen even standing in front trying to stop the vehicle from going further.
Okay, stop again. So what do you think, Will? How's the story progressed? What are they saying now? Not what do you think or what do you know? What's the story telling you? Started at Home Depot and went to...
They're indiscriminately going to businesses and collecting up people
yes,
in unmarked vehicles and taking them to undisclosed locations.
Where are the crowds coming from?
The community.
Yeah, the word's getting out. Now, it sounds like you know enough already to know that they're actually lying to us.
Yeah, well...
Did you know that?
No, but we were just talking about long form. No, we were just talking about long form podcasts, and when high level officials, it's a very recent thing that high level officials in the United States are willing to go on these long form unscripted podcasts. I think it's really awesome, right? We saw that in the election cycle, and you're still seeing it. And Tom Homan, who's in charge of ICE, the border czar, he was the ICE director under Trump 1.
Right.
He was just on Sean Ryan for 3.5 hours.
Oh.
And I listened to all of it. It was awesome. And so it's unscripted. You know, there's not pre-planned questions because 3.5 hours of them just doing this.
That was this week.
It was like 2 weeks ago, I think.
Oh, 2 weeks ago.
A week ago.
I still should listen to it. And Kash Patel was on with Joe. It was so good with Joe Rogan.
So that's you get way more insight. Like, why would I not listen to a long
President
form?
Trump was with Joe Rogan for 2 hours.
I think it's such a service to a government like ours, which is, you know, by the people for the people, to be provided that level of insight into what the person's like, how they think. They're just reacting live to a conversation like this. It's really quite awesome.
Thank you.
Anyway, Tom Homan.
Wait a minute. I'm going to put you on pause because
Okay.
you just served me a low-hanging curveball right over the plate of what I want to hit, and I'm going to hit it out of the park right here. What Will just said is exactly one of the points we need to make, and that is when you have a long-form podcast, it's hard for a person to give you talking points for 2 hours.
They can't hide.
You're going to tell the truth. But before that, the persons who told us the story of what was happening in the world, and this is from my childhood, was a little something we called the news. And for us, the news came in 1 hour a day segments, depending on when you watched. For most people, after work, you had the evening news and the local news. Now, moms at home, I know I'm dating myself, maybe watching the Today Show or the morning news, or if you were a retiree and you were home in the afternoon, you could watch the daytime news, or if you stayed up late, you can watch the late news. But the big news was always 5:30 to 6 to 6:30, where you see the local news and you see the national news.
And when you say 1 hour segment, the actual segments were probably 5 minutes.
Well,
like it was 1 hour of...
with commercials. So you probably had 22 minutes of show. And there was no cable news because we didn't have cable, and you didn't have any internet, and so you had very little.
And when they would cover something like this, out of that 22-minute showtime, this might be 6 minutes.
Yes, it could be big news. This would be big news, so they take a lot of time on this. And what that required from us, and really got from us, was trust. Because there was a time when, especially in my grandparents' time, when there was such trust in the institutions, that means the news, that they wouldn't lie in public. They wouldn't do it. And then that carried into my dad's time, but it started to slip. I remember my dad, there's a lot of people today talk about Walter Cronkite being a very trustworthy journalist, but my dad, when I was a kid, didn't care for him at all. Why? Because he actually went to Vietnam for a couple of years. He actually left some blood behind before he came home. He saw people die, and he knew the truth, and he knew Walter Cronkite was lying. But it still didn't come across that how biased the news was until really recently when then cable news came out. Then you had 24/7 news. But still, the point is, someone telling the story, if you trust them, they determine what's there. We really have more ability now to know more than at any other time. And I think you can know, even though AI is coming and deep fakes and people lying to you is more prevalent, probably not less, it's easier to know what the real facts are because there's so many ways to cross-check everything. So I'm going to give you the cross-check here, and anyone who wants can use their Google, their Grok, their whatever to cross-check me. They did not do a sweep of Home Depot, and they did not do a sweep of some other place. What they had were arrest warrants for specific criminals.
And I knew that already without even watching this.
Because you just don't trust them presuppositionally.
No, because that's what Tom Homan in his thing said. That's what we're doing. He said they're lying to us. We do not have the manpower or the money to sweep all 20 million. He said we have specific people that have criminal records that we're trying to go after, and we try to work with the local government to get them in efficient ways. And if they won't do that, and then we get a federal employment record or whatever that lets us know they're working here, and this person has a violent criminal history, then we're going to go get them at work. And he said, and what that does is, he said, the locals, he said, they just want bad media to demonize us. He said, if they would work with us, he said, there would be less collateral arrests, is what he calls it.
Yes.
He said, but if they won't work with us, and eventually we go in to get this violent criminal who's got a warrant for his arrest at his place of business, we're required by law, by statute, he says, to then any other illegal we encounter, we have to arrest them as well.
Right.
He said, and that's not my fault. He said that has to go to the legislature. He said,
He's
I'm required to follow.
So
the
they are
statutes.
not just going to LA because if you wanted to just do basic sweeps, I think you'd leave California alone because you have this mess.
Yeah.
You could go to any state in the country where you have all kinds of foreigners and just do sweeps. That's not what they're doing. And the difference with a warrant means you can no longer talk about due process. You know, this Abrego Garcia guy that kept saying, did he get due process? A warrant is due process. It means a judge did the process of saying, yes, these are bad people, go get them. And these are illegal criminals. And I don't think anyone in America with any sense wants, I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of people you're going to see who don't have sense. But most people in America don't want illegal criminals. Even if you are in favor of an illegal gardener, you don't want an illegal rapist in your,
right. And
in
it's
your
so
neighborhood.
funny. Going back, so apropos to what you're talking about, is that like, so Tom Homan in this interview, he covered that as well. He talked about due process. He said all these people we're going after have been given to us by a judge. A judge they've been found guilty in a court of law. They were supposed to show up. They're out on bond. They didn't. Now we have their arrest warrant. We're tasked by the court system, by the judicial system. He's going through all this, talking about how the local people in places like California, by local people he means the local governments, local DA, they're not cooperating because they want this bad press.
That's right.
To demonize him. And now, the reason I find him trustworthy is because this whole discussion was developed over a 2-hour conversation with Sean Ryan, and like you get to see what Tom Homan's like. You get him to there's whether he's just a masterful liar or not. In a 2.5-hour thing, you start to understand his background, listen to him talking about these, and it's so case in point funny to me that I'm not aware of this situation at all.
But you're seeing it right there.
But you're covering the facts,
well,
and it is lining up perfectly with what he talked about a week and a half ago on a 3-hour podcast.
Excellent example. Let's go farther, because my point here isn't simply the riots. I think they're a symptom. But who tells the story and who you believe? And I think what we're seeing now is the nation is not believing the news anymore. Not straight out. If you remember the George Floyd riots, there was a lot of organization, a lot of money behind those. But at the time, we were told it was spontaneous. So I think they're trying to say the same thing here, and I don't think it's going to work. Because these weren't just crowds of people. As it turns out, it's been several days, and today, sitting here on the, I'll give it away. I'll give away the magic. It's the 11th or 12th of June, I think 11th. 6 days in, we already have proof that people are paying activists to go and do this rioting. But that doesn't mean that your retirees, and that's mainly who's watching, who watch just ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, MSNBC, CNN, that they know this because they don't trust other news sources, and many of them don't have the sophistication. By the way, here I don't mean sophistication means intelligence. It has nothing to do with that. They're not informed, let me say it that way, of how to find alternative media, and they have no interest in it. So they'll watch the same shows they always watched, and they have no idea that they're being lied to necessarily. But increasingly, that's a smaller and smaller group of people. So they're telling the basic truths in this story, giving you real pictures, but they're not telling you the whole truth. Let it keep playing just for a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the next.
Later in the afternoon, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the Los Angeles Federal Building, calling for an end to immigration raids in the city. Footage shows protesters vandalizing the building and heckling law enforcement. Police with riot gear were seen confronting the protesters with batons and what appeared to be tear gas rifles. The Los Angeles Police Department posts on X saying there is an unlawful assembly in the area of Aliso Street in downtown LA and advises demonstrators and others to leave the area. The next day, around 10:15 a.m., the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department responded to reports of a large crowd gathering in Paramount, a small city about 20 miles south of downtown Los Angeles, amid false rumors of immigration agents planning a raid on a Home Depot in the area. Officers warned the protesters to disperse as intensity grew. Another protest occurred in Compton, with some protesters starting a series of vandalization.
Okay, you can stop now.
Now we're getting serious. We're in Compton, baby.
Yeah, you can just turn this video off. They're completely obfuscating. You have no idea what's happening. Some people were in front of a Home Depot, and people came, and it wasn't true. And now we're moving to Compton. Now they're just showing you pictures, and they're not really telling you much. Let me show you a little more data. Let's keep throwing stuff out there. The one that starts at 11:22. Could you show us this? I like the split screen. I'm stealing from another podcast here, from the Ruthless podcast, because I couldn't find the original videos, because a lot of times these original videos disappear once people realize that they show you how stupid you are. But these guys already captured it. They're more sophisticated than I am at getting videos. So go ahead and hit play, and let's just let it play out. By the way, Ruthless is another long-form podcast. There the guy is. Push that little triangle. There you go. Go.
Presented. Check out this professor in clip 2.
We could see the president potentially, again, pull the cord and say, I need to invoke the Insurrection Act. As I'm sure you've been talking about, the Insurrection Act would give the president more authority.
Okay, I want you to stop it just for a second. So what he's showing is, this is an ABC affiliate, Channel 7, Jessica Levinson, American law professor. She's often on ABC all over the place as an expert. And what their story they're telling is that you have protests, and the president just sends in the National Guard willy-nilly because he wants to cause trouble. But these people are pretty much peaceful, and we should let them be. Of course, there's all kinds of information not given there. One, you cannot call in the National Guard unless the governor wants it. But if the governor won't do it, he can be overridden if it's an emergency. And it turns out Governor Newsom's was letting L.A. burn.
Governor Newsom, governor of California.
Yeah, he was letting L.A. burn, and the mayor of L.A., that fine woman who let the Palisades burn, was letting them burn, just like back in 2020 when Walsh let Minneapolis burn. They were just letting him burn to the point where even the chief of police there said, we're being overwhelmed, and President Trump then said, we're not going to allow this, and I'm going to override, and I'm going to send in the National Guard to stop them. And this caused the news media to try to tell a story. Now, I don't care where you are on hearing this, on who you think is right or wrong. What I'm trying to show you is they're telling a different story than the real one. And their story is, what they want you to hear is this story, that President Trump is creating the problem by sending soldiers. And by sending soldiers and sweeping into these stores, and he's causing spontaneous crowds, and then he sends soldiers to whip them up. And of course, people are resisting this authoritarianism, and that's what's causing the trouble. Of course, that's all one big lie. But here you have Jessica Levinson as the expert who's telling you that the president needs to cool things down. But the picture on the right side of the story, which the news station is interviewing her while showing the live action, is going to show you that everything she says is stupid. So go ahead and finish it.
Federalize the National Guard, but to say that the National Guard can actually act as domestic law enforcement, that the military on U.S. soil can search, can seize, can arrest. That's not something that we're accustomed to. So I'm looking to see, obviously, what's happening right now, but also how the situation evolves and how the president reacts.
And we have seen the president allude to the fact that, and we're watching, sorry, Professor, there's a split screen here on the right side of your screen. We're seeing continued demonstrations, and a firebomb was just thrown down off of the 101 freeway overpass onto one of those CHP vehicles below.
Okay, stop that. I think the point that made them laugh is the point that makes me laugh. You can take that video down now, hon. Thank you. Sorry, I call her hon. I call young women hon all the time. I'm going to get in trouble one of these days. It's okay with me. I know you don't, but there's people offended. But here
depends on what your parents did.
The one on the side is saying these are just protesters, and he even calls them protesters. He says protesters. They're blowing up a car right in front of you. And the news guy calls them protesters. What's that say to you?
It's 2020 all over again.
Folks, you're allowed to think for yourself because there is a God. Protesters who are peacefully protesting don't set police cars on fire.
That was like a Molotov cocktail.
Oh, man. Now, I had another one I tried to get, didn't get, but I have someone else making fun of one. Again, this one has so many memes, but I could not get the original. I only found the original one place, Real Clear Politics, and we had trouble pulling that video. So I'm going to have Tim Pool, another long-form podcaster, who actually is going to get to make the joke that I want to make. So could you
have your beep button ready?
Tim
Pool. Sorry,
Tim Pool.
I thought you were going to say Tim Dillon.
No, if people cuss ever on these things, it's hard to get away from it these days. But go ahead and hit it if you don't mind. And
it's a mostly peaceful people just watching cars burn.
That's
the new line.
That's what they said.
It's not an insurrection. It's not invasion.
He gets to tell you this. I wanted to tell you. Show the video.
A large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between.
Could you back that up? Play it again. People just having fun watching cars burn. If the president sends troops in there, it could get bad.
Yeah, it's
one more time. Let's see that one more time. Back that up, and you could let Tim talk again. There you go. Just hit it. This is hard to believe that a news media guy would say this.
Just watching cars burn. That's the new line. It's not a riot. It's not an insurrection. It's not an invasion. It's mostly peaceful, people just watching cars burn.
Large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
Okay, stop right there. Thank you, Sunshine. Well done. Is that hilarious? You have a serious local LA Channel 7, probably one of the most high paid, not counting New York, local news readers, casters, saying as serious as he can. If we send in the troops, people are just having fun watching cars burn.
Get hairy.
Yeah, I know. They're just hanging out watching the cars burn. It's just good, clean fun on the streets of LA, setting cars on fire. Look at the
cars, Like that's what just baffles me.
Have you heard of these Waymos?
What's a Waymo?
See, I didn't know either. I just learned. People in cities know what Waymos are. I flew to Phoenix last week, and I called a Lyft, and I didn't know I could call a Waymo. But apparently in big cities like Phoenix, LA, they have Waymos, which are unmanned cars run by Google. And instead of calling Lyft or Uber or a taxi, you call a Waymo. And it comes and it picks you up. And they were all over the place.
With nobody in it.
And they're just as cheap, or if not cheaper. And so...
was there a person in it?
No, they just pick you up. So what they've been doing in LA is calling Waymos, by they, the organized protesters, they've been calling Waymos. When they come, they set them on fire. And they've set them boom, 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 boom. Just setting people's property clean on fire. This is peaceful protesting. There was one guy who's been throwing bricks at people, and he threw one on a cop and hit him, and the cop went down. I don't have the video of that, but probably many people have seen it because the stories of catching him is just breaking today. They just caught the guy, and he's going to be prosecuted for murder, attempted murder.
Good.
But these are being called, and I don't know how they're going to develop this story by the time you guys hear this, but the media is trying to say that this is all Trump's fault, and I don't care about. It's not about the Trump thing. It's about the facts. It's all Trump's fault. He's creating problems by getting rid of illegals and hurting their children. But none of that's true. There's people paying insurrectionists. They just like on George Floyd, these towns have pallets of bricks out for no good reason, just sitting there. And then
where did they come from? Where does a pallet of bricks come from?
Well, someone's paying. And actually, now, because of who's in power and because of the internet, we know who is funding it. Literally, his name is known now. And I could probably look it up now and find it for you. One of the funders is, let's see, I'll find it later, but he can find it while I'm talking. But so you had the mayor saying, we don't need the president's help. We don't need any law enforcement. We have this under control. To now, last night, she put an 8 o'clock curfew on all the streets. We got this under control, but everyone better go home before 8 o'clock. And the cops of LA are finally being empowered to fight back, thanks to, I think, the National Guard putting pressure on them by being there, and even some of the U.S. Marines being pressure on there by being there. Right now, I just opened a news site. It has Newsom playing a fiddle while LA burns. Newsom seemed to want to make this into an issue where he could become the president. He's running on how he's protecting America from the dictators. Meanwhile, the leftists, Antifa is there, of course. People wearing Palestinian garb. What do they care? They're all showing up, and they're all fighting against ICE law enforcement to try to stop them from getting rid of criminals. Now, what's happening on the big picture in our nation is something I want to talk about for a minute. I did want to talk about the gaslighting, and we're going to come back to that, or the way the story is told. But what's happening in the big picture, I think, is even more important. Because now that we know that the storytellers are lying to us, what is the real story? Who's been paying Antifa? Who organized the riots of George Floyd's day? Who organized them now? What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? I think America is very much on dicey ground. For those of us who are kind of relieved that Biden and Harris are out of office, and it seems like we've taken a swerve back to normalcy in the right direction, we're by no means out of the woods. Because what is going to discipline a people who are free has to be an internal belief system. You have to believe that there's a God.
John Adams.
Right. And some people hear that and think, are you saying everyone has to be a Christian? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the way we've seen it work in history is everyone agreed with the Christians about who God was. And even if they didn't agree with that God or believe in that God, they were willing to behave as if that God were there because they realized that was the bent of society. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if everyone in your town believes there is a Christian God and you should do unto others as they do unto you, and that there's a law that's above men that comes from heaven, and you don't, at least you're going to say, well, but that's what we believe in my society, and so I'm not going to go against that. Well, today we don't have that. And right now, Trump is an old man, so he comes from the age when he remembers when that was the rule of the world. But he's not an ideological figure. At least he's not robust. He's not profound in his ideology. This is not a criticism, but he's very practical. He wants to do what seems right to him, and that's fine. But he's not. He couldn't explain first principles.
No,
I don't think.
He's kind of pragmatic. He adjusts on the fly to what he thinks popular opinion is too. Yeah.
And he's willing to take losses against what he thinks is right if it'll get the job done.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you do have some who understand that you need philosophical underpinnings, but with the rise, we've talked about AI. I'm not going to start that up again, except to say with the rise of AI as a powerful tool, with the rise of soon-to-be trillionaires, like Elon Musk, frankly, who controls Starlink, which you say, who cares? Well, that controls the Wi-Fi for a good portion of the planet now, believe it or not. And he may soon be a trillionaire. He probably will be a trillionaire. Some people think it'll be within a year or two he'll have $1 trillion, and within, if you give him 10 years, he'll have $30 trillion. Literally, he could pay off the national debt himself. And you might think, well, maybe he will. No, he won't. What he'll do is he'll have control. One day he's going to be able to control the president. He tried seemingly recently, and it didn't work. But how much longer? The president will be gone in 3 years.
He might win it next time around.
He doesn't even have to run, though. He can just say, you don't do what I want, I turn off your power grid. He literally would have that power if he has his AI going. He can literally say, if you don't do what I want, I turn off the Wi-Fi for the world.
We're back to Elon Musk being the man of lawlessness.
No, he could be, but it doesn't matter. The point is, any man can be now. These tech billionaires are about to be tech trillionaires, and that isn't just about how much money. It's about power to do amazing things, because they actually can buy anything, and they can control anything. And so what we need is ideological protection. The protection is if the people are ideologically sound, you can turn off our power. We're not going to die. We'll find a way to organize and fight back and be moral. You can't exploit an ideologically sound people. But we're not that.
No.
And so I'm not saying this as a doomsayer. I don't know what the future holds, and I hope it's good. I am saying, though, that if you're a Christian, the gospel and getting folks saved and holding to Christian beliefs is still the number one thing you can do to make your world a better place. Now, I want to pull us back, and you can comment on anything you want and interrupt.
No, it just makes me think of a very famous quote from one of my favorite founding fathers, John Adams.
Who said?
Was he our second president?
Yes.
One of the writers of the Federalist Papers, one of the big editors and co-writers of the Constitution. Obviously, Thomas Jefferson wrote the most words. But he said, after writing the Constitution, that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, and it is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other.
That's right. Yeah, if we're not generally believing in the goodness of God, then the rules can be used to cheat. And which they are. That's happening now. What we call lawfare, that's people using the rules to manipulate for their good. Not for what's right, but for their good.
Or, in the case of L.A., wholly ignored.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well, when you won't enforce, and it happened in Seattle under
Portland.
Portland, it happened in all those places. They were ignoring the law of right and wrong and the law written in their own statutes. And because they're not good people, they didn't care. It's a means to an end. So, but I do want to come back now to who's telling the story. Internet journalism, it's taken a beating by many, but it shouldn't. People seem to want to control what's said on the internet. If you are a long-form podcast person, you will know that Joe Rogan had who's the gay Englishman who came on and yelled at Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz about Zionism.
Douglas Murray,
who I like and who's very bright. And when he came on Joe Rogan and he said to Andrew Schultz, which I think was fine, Andrew Schultz needed to be dressed down. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not intellectually ready to tell the world about what they should think of Israel. You don't even understand it. And he told him why. And Andrew Schultz and Douglas Murray was absolutely right, and Andrew Schultz is a yo-yo. He should stay in his lane. But where Douglas Murray was wrong, he seemed to be chiding Rogan and really the whole internet world and saying you're irresponsible if you put people on who don't know what they're talking about, and that I disagree with. Rogan should be able to have any idiot on he wants. It is now we need to be a buyer beware, because if you try to control the content givers, you end
up with Walter Cronkite.
You end up with people who tell the story the way they want. And even though I may agree with Douglas Murray today, I might not agree with him tomorrow. And if he gets to control who tells the story, then that's the only story you get.
Well, and I watched a follow-up with Rogan, and really his biggest problem, which I think is what you're getting at, is this we're in the era, well, actually, we're in the declining era, I hope, of the experts. Only the experts I need to have some sort of credentials to be able to tell you the truth. And if you're not credentialed or you're not an official expert on the subject, you can't possibly have anything true or meaningful to say about a subject. And it was really it was like an ad hominem attack.
Which means against the man.
Against the man. It was
that's right. And
he was attacking Schultz's character or knowledge or him
his
as
resume
as an expert. Yeah, a resume rather than his ideas. And that's what Rogan had the biggest problem
with. And they
with.
did that to Jesus. Jesus was often told, who taught you these things? And where did, and what they were saying was, who's your rabbi? And he's saying, God's my rabbi. And truth should stand on its own. And I'd go farther and say the expert class is lost. They've lost it. They're going to have to win it back.
Yeah,
who trusts a university anymore? You have people actually teaching that math is subject to racial thinking, in that to say 2 + 2 is 4 could be a racist thing if a black person says 2 + 2 is 5. Now, no decent black person I know ever said that, nor decent white person I know ever said that, but there are experts who say that. And you have the expert class. Fact is, like it or not, because of the proliferation of information and the availability to it, you could know more than your doctor about whatever he or she is treating you for.
I do in certain things. This just got proven
because you advocate for yourself.
Yeah. Do you want an example?
Yeah.
Like, long-standing clinical fact now that creatine, a very common workout supplement that they're now finding has a lot more health benefits.
I thought it was creatine. Is it creatine?
Whatever.
I think
no, creatinine is a byproduct of it.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, they measure creatinine in your blood for a kidney test, and if it gets elevated, they say you're having kidney problems. But if you're taking creatine, it naturally goes up. It's actually a false marker for kidney issues, and I know that, and the whole world knows that, and we've known that for 20 years, and that creatine is totally safe to take every day. It's double-blind studies taken all over the place, like if you know the literature, and it'll make this kidney marker go high, but you can look at other kidney markers and know that your kidneys are functioning fine. And he's arguing with me that I'm damaging my kidneys, and he wants to mark me as at risk for kidney failure, which would screw up any life insurance I want to buy. And I'm like arguing with my yo-yo Armstrong County PCP because I don't blame him.
Please don't say his name.
Look, right? You're like at a small family practice. You don't have time to keep up on research, literature,
right? Well,
and all
that's
that
exactly
stuff.
my point, and I'm going to jump in there to pull us back into this.
But there's a perfect example, right?
So expertise. You want to know what was really on display nationally? A great example is back to Joe Rogan and ivermectin. When he got COVID, he took ivermectin, and the storytellers
got lambasted.
The storytellers of the national news made fun of him, saying he took horse medicine. Do not listen to him; he's a fool. And the pharmacists all over the country were told, do not give ivermectin to people for this. Doctors were scolded through their professional associations, saying, tell people ivermectin is not for COVID. And so you had literally a face-off between just some meathead. I mean, you could call Rogan a meathead. He's first an athlete and a comedian.
Yeah, I don't think he has any college degree or
no.
Right?
And he likes martial arts and he goofs around a lot. And Fear Factor, eating bugs. This guy was right. Ivermectin is not dangerous. It's very common. It's been around for years. It doesn't hurt you. It does no harm if you have COVID, and it did seem to help, versus the entire expert establishment of university medicine and the media and the National Organization or National Institute of Health. He was right, they were wrong. But we were being told, don't listen to him because he's not an expert. So climate change is happening that way too. Climate change, consensus of scientists. Well, it turns out they're full of crud.
So my point you're trying to make is the onus is on you now.
Is buyer beware.
Relying on the expertise or relying on the resume of the information giver is
and I would go farther. You're not too stupid to figure things out. Now, a lot of people will just trade experts for someone who's stupid. For example, we have a lot of people who I think are credible in other ways who believe the earth is flat. Why? All they did was change one authority, trusting one authority, to trusting another authority on the internet. The earth is not flat. It's just not. And I'm not going to get into that fight. And I know, let me give you the reasons why there's a ice shelf and all this other stupid stuff. It's not true. There's too much evidence the other way. And I've experienced too much evidence the other way by flying over the top of the North Pole and not seeing the ice shelf, but other reasons. But there's people who tell you that wrong things are true too. And if you take them on authority, you're an idiot. So then what do? You think for yourself, and when you have enough knowledge to make a conclusion, make the conclusion, and when you don't, say, I don't. Right now, though, I would say internet journalism is become something that people used to laugh at, but you cannot laugh at it. Because I show you the ABC News clip, and I'm telling you, I know people like my grandparents were. Not my dad. He's very sophisticated with these things. But they just watch the news.
Yeah, my mom and dad are still in that boat. They're
my
in their
mother-in-law
70s.
just watches CNN, and whatever they say is so. It doesn't occur to her that they might not be giving her an accurate worldview, and it doesn't mean she's a bad person or a dumb person. That was the presupposition of a previous generation. It was something you could take for granted. It was axiomatic, to use a big word. But like right now, how do you find out what's really happening? You say, Pastor Mike just told me you can't trust the ABC News people. You can't. Well, who can you trust? Well, you're going to have to collect it from every source you can. But I would not overlook going on X or going on Substack, which now is a really cool app, by the way, and finding people who are actually on the ground. One guy, and I don't have any clip from him, his name Andy No, GNO. This guy's got guts coming out of his guts. He's a man, and it's funny because he's gay, but he is a man's man. He shouldn't sleep with other men. It's wrong, but he does. But he don't say he doesn't have guts. He's taken beatings going down into Antifa, and he's hit L.A. and now he just flew to New York to cover the same riots because these are popping out everywhere. But I do have another guy. This guy I don't even know who he is, but there's all kinds of guys. So, Sunshine, could you hit that one that says anti-ICE protester fight with police? This is just a YouTube short from another, what we could call internet journalist. What that's going to be when you see him is like a 21-year-old kid who's out there just finding the facts. You can hit play and interrupt me whenever you're ready.
Now that people are trying to block ICE from leaving this place, they're throwing garbages here onto the streets, trashing it.
That's your city. This is how the sheriff works.
Look, you had this guy taunting and messing with the police. He's gotten thrown a few times by the police, and he's keeping on going back to him too. This guy right here just got pushed by the police.
They should just arrest the dude.
Police threw him down, and he keeps going after him. How do you feel about the police coming through here today?
They're fascists. Quit their jobs.
Forgive the cussing.
These are the same streets where the riots did take place in 2020 after the George Floyd incident.
Okay, I think that's where it ends. Okay, now that doesn't tell a whole story.
What city is that in?
It's a short. I don't even know. But my point is this. You could find out by following that particular guy. That's a short. A short, for those who don't know, on YouTube is a
1 minute video.
A 1 minute video to try to get you into an algorithm where you watch one after another after another after another. I wouldn't do it because you'll get stuck. It's like a drug. But sometimes they're handy if you go search shorts because you can find a short video. But that's just an example of one person's 1 minute. Now, no doubt that guy has hours. And there's 1,000 guys like that. And you say, what value is that? He's literally, whether he tells a story well or not, whether he understands journalistic school stuff or not, doesn't matter. He's literally on the street showing you the pictures, telling you what's happening.
Yes, and it's unfiltered.
And if you get enough of those from the same area, you can begin to draw your own conclusions. And I think you should. And so that leads me to the issue that I'm leading up to. I look at as an important part of my job as the lead pastor of Harvest Church to stay in tune with culture, and I always have. I was never taught this in seminary, nor was I not taught this in seminary. No one brought up the subject at all. To be well read, I've heard people say you should read all kinds of things, read novels, read nonfiction, read old books, read new books. Pastors got that advice back in the 90s. And I don't know what advice they're giving at my seminary today. But I believe it's my responsibility to know what's happening in the world and know culture. And I'm going to justify it in a minute. But I want to first push back against it. There's a lot of pastors who try to avoid culture or take a certain pride of not knowing what's happening.
It doesn't matter. The Bible. Just stick to the Bible.
Just stick to the Bible. And I've heard that one.
The Bible and nothing more, please.
And the fundamentalist approach, just the Bible's enough. Actually, John Piper is one who often has no idea what's happening. And I've loved his ministry. I have nothing against it. Eventually, culture invades because culture is like that. It will invade. So I'm not criticizing John Piper. So if anyone talks to Pope John, the Protestant Pope, tell him I'll kiss his ring. I love him and all that stuff. But there are others who know, they hear what's going on, and they take a different tact. What do you think that tact would be?
They bring it in.
Well, before we get to there, because if John Piper is on one good part of the spectrum, which is just the Bible, and then the bad part is just bring the culture in, what's the middle ground?
Speak to the culture.
No.
Oh.
No. This is the bad spectrum.
Fishing.
You're looking for something good.
Yeah.
There's something in between the two on the bad spectrum, and that is ignore the culture so no one gets offended. So you know it's there, but we're not going to touch on that. So you know enough about culture.
We don't want to poke anybody in the eye.
Right. When I first, for example, I was talking about transgenderism early. In fact, so early that I offended some people who weren't up to speed.
Yeah, well, and then people are like, why is this even relevant?
Well, before we got to that, I said Caitlyn Jenner is the ugliest woman I've ever seen in the middle of talking about men and women. And somebody got back to me and said, that's a horrible thing to say about a woman. Because he, the churchgoer, fairly thought Caitlyn Jenner was a woman, didn't know that it was a man. And then I was making a statement. Another time, I criticized Anderson Cooper for stealing a baby because he adopted a baby. And I got criticism even from someone who's currently a pastor online with us.
This is that samurai.
Yeah. But I got ahead of myself because I didn't realize people didn't understand that Anderson Cooper is a very wealthy gay man. He comes from what?
The Kellogg.
No, the Yves Saint Laurent or no.
The Vanderbilts.
The Vanderbilts, that's right. He's one of the Vanderbilts, and he's gay, and him and his boyfriend, who he calls a husband, used some of their bodily fluids, and they bought one woman's eggs, and they took them and transplanted it in another woman's stomach, had that woman carry their baby, we don't really know whose, and his, and then when the mother gave birth, the baby was stolen from the mother and given to these two gay men to take away from their mother. And I should have explained all that. I didn't. I just said Anderson Cooper, who people know from CNN, stole a baby. And someone said, adoption isn't stealing babies. I know adoption's not stealing babies. So you can run into trouble. But most people, when I got to one on transgenderism, I remember explaining, because the cult, and I'm talking about 2019, 2018, 19, 20, of transgenderism was getting to the point where women were removing their breasts. And women were taking hormones before the age of 18. By the way, I want to keep saying this over and over again. Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh promotes this. The only reason they stopped doing it is because of President Trump. They will do it again. Their board is devilish. They're demonic. They're evil. Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. I want to be on record.
UPMC.
They may do many good things, but they are devilish, evil at the top. There's many good people who work there, but at the top, they work for Satan. Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh is willing.
Did you wet your finger before you poked that eyeball?
No. It shows you, though, if you don't take a stand in culture, Evil will get to the point where it seems good. Nothing could be better in the world than children's hospitals. We all love children. We all love health. And Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh are mutilating children in a way that Joseph Mengele would have liked, cutting the breasts off of people. And it is happening to people under 18. And they call it affirming care. And they call me a hateful. But I'm not hateful. Okay. So anyway.
So we're on this culture.
I brought it up spectrum. In a sermon, and a guy who visited once came and said, don't you realize that people are being... That you're blasting these people and they're a minority and I'm like, no, what I'm doing is I'm telling the Christian parents in my church, you as a Christian parent have a responsibility to tell your kids the truth, no matter what Reddit or Instagram is telling them. And if you're a Christian kid going through this confusion, you're not the other sex, and you need to run to Christ. So telling the truth got pushback, and not just from him. Several people who were more knowledgeable asked the question, and it was an honest question. It wasn't a criticism. Wouldn't it be better just to preach the gospel and just leave that stuff out? Because what if those people are there? You're going to offend them. The push is just to be quiet on abortion, to be quiet on divorce, and to be quiet on LGBTQ or politics. Nothing made me more ashamed of David Platt, that when President Trump in his first term stopped by his church and asked to come on the stage, he let him on the stage, and Platt was kind of standoffish, but he prayed for him. Then he took heat for praying for him, and then he apologized for praying for him. To which I say, David Platt, what a weenie you turned out to be. I know you write great books about how we got to give all for Christ, but you're so afraid of the criticism of people that you can't see that praying for people in authority
is commanded
in the scripture, and give honor to where honor is due. Whether you voted, if Biden showed up at Harvest, I wouldn't change my message if it said something that offended him, but I would point out that the President of the United States is here, and it's a great honor for our church, and I would pray for him publicly without apology. And trust me, that's 90% of my church would be saying, why are you praying for that clown? you know, the pastor has to have the guts to hold the culture of God. Now, the question is, and by the way, any comment on that? Because I want to move on from that idea as a foundation. I don't know if I've made it strong enough.
You don't see any biblical example that I know of what we often refer to as a hero of the faith, Old Testament prophets all the way up to John the Baptist to Jesus, that doesn't do this. It's not just the Bible, please, and nothing else.
You tell Herod, that fox, that I'm going to keep working till I'm done.
John the Baptist literally got beheaded because he was railing against Herod for marrying his brother's sister, right?
His brother's wife.
That's what I meant.
Worse.
That's what I meant. I meant brother's wife. His sister-in-law. His sister-in-law. Elijah is getting chased all around Israel because he's railing against the
Jezebel.
evil queen. It's the whole Bible is the preachers
should not sell out.
The preachers, not only that, they all address the cultural decline publicly, yes, often to their great discomfort and suffering.
Let me ask why, and I know I got you cold here. I didn't tell you I was going this direction. Why do you think culture matters for pastors to address? And then I'm going to ask after that, so you can think about how much and how should they address it.
Well, culture matters because, I was going to get highbrow.
Get highbrow.
The root of the word is cultus, I think, which is the same root word for cult, and really cultures come out of a collective object of worship.
I never thought of that. Never even heard of that.
Yep.
This is news for all of us. How about you?
So it's a common thread. Like culture comes out, and we recognize it. When you have a shared culture, there's a shared commonality, a common thread. And that, I think the history of the word comes from, most often, tribes or nations shared a religion. Like until very recently.
Oh, yeah.
Like biblical
we still
times.
Do.
Old times.
It's just Satanism.
Right. And so, and culture culture is an educator. It's an insidious, well, it's not always insidious. It's a not so obvious constant educator of the people. It's a schoolmaster. They're learning from the culture
how to be,
what
is right,
without even
what is
knowing
wrong,
and explicitly being told. Like, you're learning, right? The morality of the day, what's valued by society of the day. It's very hard to grow up in an era, in a place, and not, until you're educated by the Bible otherwise, to take on the culture's value system, morale, like the moral system of the culture. You think what you think is right growing up is going to end up being, unless you're corrected elsewhere, what the culture thinks is right and wrong. What's valuable to the culture is what's going to be valuable to you. You're swimming in an ocean of knowledge that's being seeped into you. Like, so it's a schoolmaster. Culture is a schoolmaster.
For example, we did a podcast to answer Sunshine's question about, if you're getting married, should you desire to have children? The answer is countercultural.
Which I've gotten feedback. We touched a few eyeballs on that one.
I'd like to know. I'd like to hear about that. But I've personally keep running into people who keep telling me about their great plans for when they're going to have a baby, and all these things they have to do first, and all this money they have to make first, and I mean Christian people, and so it's offensive to many. It's corrective, I think, to the open-hearted and the humble. But the fact is, our culture is wrong compared to God's commands. Now, that's not always true. A culture can be validated by God, too. So the Bible is not always bad news to every element of your culture. Americans believe in feeding the poor. That's good. Whether we should do it through welfare or not, that's a different question. But we believe in feeding poor people. That's a good thing. The Bible would say good. So the culture can be patted on the back by the Bible. But when it disagrees with the Bible, even if all the Christians in the church believe it to be okay, it doesn't matter. It matters what God says. And God is a corrective. The culture is our collection of rights and wrongs as human beings, and we're wrong. Our culture says it's okay to sleep with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, before you're married. Our culture says all kinds of stupid things. And the reason why it's important for pastors to keep up with cultural trends is because their people are swimming in them, and they're supposed to preach to their people. So here's a question. I'm going to promote my own problem. What's too much? Before that, let me show a video that I think gives a good example. Now, this one has the CNN host laughs. I don't like the way this guy made this video because for some reason he likes to use blurriness. I don't think any blurriness was needed. The preacher in it is a young Vodi Bakum. He was younger, fatter, with a smaller beard. Vodi Bakum's a great pastor, and Vodi Bakum gives the right opinion, but it shows the culture versus the pastor. And if you could just show that whenever you're ready, Sunshine, we'll take a look.
Watch this CNN host laugh at this pastor, then watch his epic response.
And quite frankly, feminism has gained a foothold in many evangelical churches.
Do you think that's a good thing?
No, I don't. Not at all.
Why not?
Well, because we're about the gospel. The culture doesn't dictate truth. The gospel dictates truth. My job is not to be a political pundit or political activist. My job is to be a pastor and proclaim the truth of the gospel as clearly as I possibly can.
Margaret, is the Reverend sounding a little sexist, or is it just me?
I would have to say the Reverend is sounding a little questionable there.
My job is to be honest with the text. And the text says in Titus chapter 2 and verse 5, a woman is to be the keeper of her home. Now, I will not violate the teaching of the text in order to somehow sound more appropriate for the culture. I am a herald of the truth of the gospel, and my job is to teach the gospel according to what the authors have said, not according to what I think.
Okay, that's good.
Culture.
He's right.
I love Vody, man.
Love Vody. Now,
if he ever falls,
you want me to tell you how you can be faithful to the Word of God and unfaithful to God as a preacher? You never say things like, I'm against feminism from the pulpit. Just don't say it. You don't have to say anything false, but you already know it's loaded. He said that to two women who laughed in his face.
On television.
And if he says it to his congregation, he has women and men going to work where if they repeat it, they will get laughed at by their friends and coworkers. And it is, I hate to say it, my guess is most pastors will just avoid things like that. They'll just avoid it, to which I would point them to Luther, who says, and I'm paraphrasing an idea, I don't have the quote, he says if a pastor preaches in every right truth that the Bible says, but he neglects the part where Satan is attacking, then he's a liar and a bad pastor. And in our culture, feminism is destroying our culture. It's part of destroying our culture. It's not the devil. It's a tool of the devil, one of many. And it is what got us to transgenderism, because it tried to destroy the nuclear family, it redefined male and female, and in a way that's ungodly. And pastors don't preach on it. They don't want to talk about feminism because it's a distraction from the gospel. It isn't.
It's an application of the
gospel. And by the way, to give John Piper his due, he's fought against feminism. So I'm not saying he's against the culture. He just doesn't feel a need to stay up. Eventually, when it gets to him, he fights.
And he also just retired. So.
Well, but he fights. He actually was the founder of CBMW, Council of Biblical Man and Womanhood, which is a very strong organization. So I'm not saying he's not a fighter. But the pastor here is saying, I've got to teach my people what the Bible says about women, and I know that they're learning something else in school, in college, everywhere they go. So if I don't say what's true, I'm failing God. I would go farther. If pastors don't say what's true of what God says, then who will? You'll have some individual Christians, and they'll be looked at like firebrands and
crazies.
But besides that, you have nobody. And it's always been the case, nothing new is happening, that the majority of God's shepherds, if are not God's shepherds. And that was true in the time of Israel. It's true today. I'd say the majority of people call themselves pastors need to repent or just quit. But there are a lot of fine pastors. Yikes. Well, they should. They should. It's just true. It's just true. You go to your local Methodist church and they've got Pastor Betty up there, and nobody's got the guts to say, Pastor Betty, women shouldn't be pastors. And they say, well, we broke away from the other Methodists, so we're not for gay Methodism. No, but you still disobey the Bible with impunity. And your men go to church there. And the male pastors haven't got the guts. The Saddleback guy, what a clown that guy is. His wife is his co-pastor. Anyone who has their wife as a co-pastor is if you go to a church where the wife is the co-pastor, you're listening to me right now, you are disobedient to God, because the Word of God says, I do not allow a woman to teach or have authority over a man. There is no such thing as a woman pastor over men. So if you go to church, any church, maybe in Moon Township, one of our comments came from there. The reason why you're screwed up in your life and in your faith is because you're a disobedient Christian going to a stupid church. Period. Ugh. It's just truth. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings, but either we obey God and things get better, or we don't. So here's how you keep from getting
which takes me back.
How do you keep from being sidetracked?
Oh.
Well, you can take us anywhere else. I'm going to answer that question.
What?
That's what I'm leading up to. You can take me anywhere you want.
I'm back in Hebrews.
Oh, good.
And I'm just stuck. I'm stuck on this. Hebrews 1 and 2 have this great development of Jesus being superior to Moses and the Old Testament stuff. And then in 3, it starts to exhort you, the reader, the Christian, to not be like the Israelites in the desert.
That's right.
And it makes it equates.
So it is saying, I want to summarize that before you make your point. It is saying, don't be like the people who said they were God's people. We're not talking about don't be like the pagans.
Right. And
don't be like faithless people who are supposed to be God's people.
And then it goes through a list of disobedience. It talks about disobedience a lot. And at the end, the last sentence, which is like, you're reading this whole paragraph on disobedience, and then it says, what does it say? So they weren't saved because of unbelief. It equates disobedience. It develops this whole idea, and at the end, basically, in a math equation in my head, says disobedience equals unbelief.
That's right.
And so you're saying,
that's right.
What are we doing here? Like,
that is so.
Do we
right.
mean it at all?
That's
Either
right.
we mean it or we don't mean it. Like,
yes.
I got to open it. I got to open it up.
It's not the only place.
So we see they were not able to enter because of unbelief. They didn't enter the promised land. But those, it says, and to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient?
That's
and
right.
so we see that they didn't enter because of unbelief. And so he's equating disobedience with unbelief. I'm sorry. It's just been stuck in my head recently.
I'm so glad you
this
did.
idea of disobedience being unbelief.
It is. Obedience and faith without works is dead.
Says James.
Not because...
Right? Yes.
Yes, not because we are righteous by keeping the law. But by faith we become children of God. And the nature of our Father is that He's good, and He tells us the truth. And so if we had the faith to become children of God, but as many as received Him, to them He gave the right to be called the children of God, even those who believe in His name.
John 1:12. Thank
you. And if we're that, then if our Father tells us something and we disobey His word purposely, it betrays us. Either we could say, I disobey you, God. That's not the same as saying, and by the way, all of us do that sometime. That's not the same as saying, no, my Father doesn't say what He says. And that's what you're doing on these issues. You're saying, no, my Father doesn't say what you think He says about homosexual marriage. And then you teach others, that's not what my Father says. Well, that's because your father's the devil. Because obedience says you conform to what your Father says. It doesn't mean perfection.
Otherwise, you don't trust Him.
But any Christian I know, when they disobey the Father, they say this: I'm disobeying my Father. It's not the same as someone who's saying, no, I'm changing the rules. My Father's okay.
I was just
with
reading
it.
Romans 7 with a couple guys last night, and when Paul's going through that passage, if I do what I don't want to do, I want to do what's good, but I keep doing what's evil, he says in there, I agree with the law, that the law is good.
That's right.
Right? So what he's not rejecting what's
true is true, right is right,
true
wrong
is right.
wrong.
He's just saying I can't always live up to what I acknowledge is right.
Right. And so let's get back to this. How do we keep from being
sidetracked like we continue to do here?
Because the problem is you can get into a hobby horse. And if you listen enough to me, you'll get my hobby horses. Those are areas where I'm just continually obsessed at correcting. Well, if I continually preach those things only, people are they'll say, okay, he's right, but doesn't he ever shut up and talk about something else? And they won't get the full counsel of God. So the way you keep from being sidetracked is A, you preach in an expository manner. By that I mean you're looking to take the truth from whatever text you preach, no matter how you choose that text, whether you're teaching series, whether you're teaching here or there. If you can teach whole books of the Bible, I'm not saying you have to, that in itself is good because it's going to drag you through a lot of different subjects that may not be your hobby horse. In fact, I find that I'm constantly changed by preaching through books of the Bible because it hits areas where I didn't have that much interest before, and now I do.
You weren't actively thinking about this, but it's the text you're preaching on this week, and so you're forced to think about it.
So the job of the preacher, first and foremost, is to understand what the original intent of the author is, what he was saying and then present that meaning to the people. That's not the end. That's the first job. If he doesn't get that right, doesn't matter what he preaches. But after that comes the application. And that, keep your cultural stuff as part of the application, and you won't go astray. Teaching on money, for example. People get on me because I make fun of all the money gurus. I am all for people who handle money well, and I'm the first to say that I have never been great in handling my own money to the extent that, I don't steal and stuff, but I don't, I don't pile up tons of money like people who all follow
like
that
me.
guy,
No,
Dave
I
Ramsey,
don't have tons of money.
Whatever. But sometimes I'll come upon things about money that the Bible says, and the application is going to culturally be corrective. It's not, I think there's this thought where as long as every time you preach about money, you preach tithe, don't go into debt, and save to give to your grandchildren, and don't be a borrower, that's all that God says. Well, those are good principles.
And they're in there.
They're in there. But that's not mostly what Jesus talks about when he talks about money. So when I come to those things, I'm like, so we're going to do a series on how to handle your money. I don't do that. When he talks about money, I let him say what he says. And he says things like, sell everything you have and give to the poor and you'll have treasure in heaven. Now, the right way to do that in Americanism is say, he doesn't really mean that. He really means save and give deliberately and be. Well, why didn't he say that? That's not what he said. And so in the application, you have to say, how can it in one place say, leave money for your grandchildren, in another place, sell everything? So you're going to have to reconcile those two and explain it. And in the application, the person walks away, hopefully, with a sense of what Jesus was saying and how to put it into practice in his or her life. Likewise, with all the so-called controversial cultural issues. And if my brain works hard enough and have an understanding of culture, I'm trusting that the Holy Spirit of God will show me where that intersects with whatever I'm studying. And at that intersection, that's your application point. That's where you criticize the culture. For example, come back to my hobby horse, women in the pulpit. I've noticed today that people now are just saying, we're just not going to fight that fight. Evangelicals are just giving in. They're just giving in.
Really?
Saddleback has led the way. Saddleback Church is one of the biggest, most influential churches in America, Rick Warren's church. And they always held to right doctrine there until right in the last year of Rick Warren's time. And then he turned over the church to a man who lets his wife do all the preaching. Right? Well, people aren't going to, they know that most people aren't going to have the guts. Most pastors aren't going to have the guts to say, those people are disobedient. That's a disobedient church. They're going to say, well, we disagree, but they're still good Christians. No, they're not good Christians. They're disobedient, and they're teaching a whole group of people to be disobedient. I'm not saying none of those people are Christians. I think they are. But I am saying they're going to shipwreck their faith because they took a step away, and they're not calling sin sin. And a lot of people are just following that. They're taking permission. They're like, hey, Saddleback did it. The world didn't end. People still go to their church. So now your local church down the street says, let's call the children's director Pastor Shirley, Pastor Jenny. Well, doesn't pastor mean the same as elder? Yeah, but she's under the male pastor. So let's say that's okay. And they just walk down that road. And if you say, why do you do that? That's wrong. They think you're a jerk. I was with a group of people, of which one is someone you know, and so I'm not going to mention exactly. But we're trying to do a collective ministry together with Harvest and members of other churches. And so I asked each one which church they went to because I wanted to get a feel for these people, and they knew about me. And one of them told me a church, and I said, you don't go there, do you? She said, yep. And I said, well, that's a cult, or at least that's a false teacher. That man's a false teacher. She goes, no. We go there. We drive all the way there from where we're at because it's a good church. No, he's a false teacher. It was very uncomfortable for all of us, including myself.
Everyone in the room is just going.
Including me.
Whoa.
Including me. But I'm thinking if we're going to work together we're not going to have the so-called elephant in the room that no one talks about. Because I'm not going to let that false teacher's teaching affect whatever we do in ministry, or we just won't do ministry with you. Pastor Joe just took this stand himself in the local area of Indiana. Somebody wanted to come and make a presentation at the church, and though he could see the good the ministry would do, he realized it was run by a so-called woman pastor, and he had to politely say to her, I like you, you're awesome, looks like your ministry's awesome, but we don't think it's biblical for you to be a pastor, so we can't let you talk at our church. Okay. By the way, he's more polite and gentle than me, and I'm not saying I shouldn't be more polite and gentle. I try to be, but we are who we are, and polite is always good. Gentle, who knows? I'm not going to judge myself right now. The point is, he took the right stand. Now, trust me, gossip will happen. People will get around. Don't go to Pastor Joe. He's one of those jerks who doesn't think you should. He's judging everybody.
Don't you know that Jesus says, "Judge not, lest you be judged"?
Yeah. But hey, the truth is the truth, and where you bring it is the application. And the application should come as the man of God studies the Word of God, and the Holy Spirit shows him, how does this fit? And that leads to where I want to go in the Bible today, which hopefully I can open it. Do you see what this says here? It wants me to spend $10 to read that version of the Bible.
Yeah, I'll explain that to you.
Yeah, well, I paid that 10 already, so I'm not going to do it. But I'm going to open the old one anyway, if I can. So open the Bible. Come on, Bible. This one. Okay. Let's go to Daniel chapter 11. A place I've looked before to talk about end times things. But here I want to talk about something else. Hold on. I'm still looking.
You got a verse?
Could you play some music for me while I look for that verse? Play some music, Sunshine. Sunshine, why don't you sing us a song? That's not a song. That's kind of like a hissing noise.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine.
You make me happy. Okay, stop singing songs. Okay, that's enough of that crap.
Hey, my daughter loves that song.
Yes, because you're her dad.
You sang that to me when I was a baby.
Oh, man. Finding things in a translation not my own is a pain. You get dependent.
Hebrews, Daniel 11. What? What's the topic?
People who have insight. People have insight. Where is that? Did you find it?
I'm looking for. Is it?
It's in 12, but it's also in 11. Here. No, that's not it. And forces for them to rise. Okay, found it. Verse 32. This is talking about the Antichrist, and I don't care about him today. I care about the second half. It says in verse 32 of Daniel 11, it says, and by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Here you have, at the end times, a people who have two things in their favor. One, they know their God personally. It's a personal relationship. They don't study the Bible to learn what the Bible says. They study their Bible so they can get to know their Father better. And they do know their Father. And they also have insight. Insight that applies to what to say when the Antichrist is saying other things. That's cultural wisdom right there. They know. Jesus in another place says, pray that you are not deceived. Pray that you are not taken by surprise. There is a necessity for the leaders of God's church and some members of God's church to spend time making sure they understand their world and their culture so that they can correctly identify what's going on. Pastor Kevin recently preached the passage where someone said, Herod said he's going to kill you, Jesus, so you should run. And Jesus said, I'm not running. He said, you tell that old fox what I'm going to do. Because he understood his times. And as you mentioned, John the Baptist, he understood the soldiers well enough when they said, Roman soldiers came to him. They weren't even Jews. What should we do to repent? And he said, listen, don't complain about your wages and quit stealing people's stuff. That's pretty much it. So he could speak to their cultural sins and saying, that's what you two do. You complain and you steal. Stop doing those things. He understood where they were failing. It's important that God's pastors pay attention to what's happening in their world without becoming self-centered on their hobby horses, always preaching the exact same thing over and over and over. And again, I think the solution is expository preaching and let the Holy Spirit show you the applications. Now, the good thing about a podcast is you can go down any doggone rabbit hole you want.
Yeah.
This isn't a sermon. It's a rabbit hole. So anyway, that's all I had for today. What do you got? Anything?
Yeah, well, I want to get to a long-awaited question. And I'll pick, I think that's the shorter of the two. Degrees of sin.
Are there degrees of sin?
So we really didn't follow our format this week, but why does it matter? We can
our
do what
format is getting smashed by reality.
That's fine. Okay. So we're at the last segment, which sometimes we skip because we don't have questions. It's called Ask Your Pastors.
Yes.
And we got a lovely question. It was verbally asked
more than once.
So I didn't get it in writing.
By share.
Generally, it breaks down to, are there such things as degrees of sin? Are there different levels of bad?
And what's your
sin?
answer to that?
Yeah.
Well, explain yourself. Let me explain why you're wrong, although I agree with you.
Well,
I don't think you are wrong. I'm going to steal your thunder, and
Okay.
you got to play the other part. I'm going to say why you're wrong, even though I agree with you and you're not wrong. The reason you're wrong is the Bible says that if you're guilty at one point of the law, you're guilty at all points. And who are you to say that one sin is worse than another? To a holy God, all sin is sin. All sin can send you to hell. So all sins are therefore the same.
I would affirm all of that.
Jesus says if you look on someone with lust, you've already committed adultery. So therefore looking at lust is just as bad as adultery. He says if you have anger in your heart, it's the same as murder. So therefore having anger at your heart at another person is the same as murder. How can you say that there's a degree to sin? You dumb head.
Yeah, it's hard. It's
head.
a good strong man. That's a good steel man argument.
Okay.
And
bring it. Where am I wrong? Prove me wrong.
Well, yeah, I should have thought about this more. One, you
think now.
You got to go to the different aspects of sin is what I would want to start with.
Okay.
So legal guilt, as I just covered this, legal guilt before God.
So guilty. We're guilty before God because we broke laws, just like they can read a statute against a guy accused and go into trial. Okay, legal guilt.
So then you have the actual wrong actions you do that's described as sin.
So not only did you break Section 1, Article 2, and did first-degree murder, you actually murdered someone. So the actual killing of the person. So you have the statute, which you're guilty of, and the act. Legal guilt
and the act.
And
the legal guilt matters because,
So there's just two?
No, there's a third.
Okay, go ahead.
I can stop doing wrong things. Let's say I managed to not sin for the whole month before Jesus comes back.
So I murdered one person, but I haven't murdered a person in 20 years.
Yeah, and Jesus comes back. And you're like, I'm not actively doing wrong things.
I'm not a murderer. I'm a good person.
And he said, but you still have the legal guilt.
20 years ago, you murdered somebody. And you're still guilty.
And the legal guilt sticks with you.
Okay.
Which we all understand because we have courts of law
Very good distinction.
and laws.
Good distinction.
So you have the actual act itself, the legal guilt associated with the act, and then you have sin being used to describe your internal corruption.
The reason I killed you in the first place is because I'm a bad person.
Yeah, it's because
inner corruption.
Sin came into the world through one man and death through sin. And
since I am a sinner, I'm not a sinner because I sin because I'm a sinner.
Yes.
I am. So you're saying that there's legal guilt that my sin produced. There's the actual act of the sin that we could also call sin. And there's also this
nature.
Internal nature, which can be called a sinful nature, or Paul calls it sin.
In Romans 6,
within. He just says it's sin. He says if I do a thing that I don't want to do because I agree with God, then it's not me doing it, but sin
within
inside me.
Yeah.
He's saying when the law comes, sin inside me takes an occasion to get strong. Okay, so you've set it out. There's 3 aspects of sin. You still have not corrected my wrongness.
I think the passage where, because the passage, I'm doing this from memory, so this is I might step into some poo-poo here, and you can correct me.
Help.
I have humility enough you could correct me live. But when Jesus is...
He's so proud of his humility. I'm the humblest guy here, says Will.
When Jesus is correcting the lust in your heart is as bad as adultery, or anger is murder, you've murdered your brother already, I think he's speaking to the legal guilt before God. That you're a sinful natured person, guilty before God.
Okay.
That you can't be in his presence without being cleansed. Let's not argue over, and I go back to the sermon we had recently where when the guys are wondering when the tower falls on people and they died, what did those guys do that were so bad? And then Jesus turns it around on them and says, do you think they were worse than you? You need to repent or you will likewise perish.
Okay, so let me sit on that for a minute. So there could be someone who in anger and in doing wrong just kills somebody and then feels bad. And then let's say I go through my life hating just about everybody that I see. And yet I say, well, I'm innocent and he's guilty. But that's not really true, because God, who looks on the heart, sees the murder. In fact, I may have more hatred in my heart by far than the guy who actually did the act. So that act...
Because you got all 3 aspects of sin. The guy w's got hatred in his heart.
But we're both guilty.
You're both guilty. All 3 of those make you guilty.
God might even say, I'm guiltier.
Maybe.
But but the act itself, let's take the guilt away. Is it worse to think, I wish this guy were dead, or to kill someone?
Yeah, to kill someone.
Which is worse? To kill someone.
To kill someone.
Obviously, it's to kill someone.
Well, you can't say obviously, because it
is
begs
obvious.
the question, right?
Well, it does it because
I'm gonna get there.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I was trying to sum you up, but I got ahead of you.
But
Go ahead.
So I think those passages, which are true, like sin in thought, word, and deed, and so the thought is included, demonstrates that you have all 3 aspects of sin. You've done wrong things,
because I'm a bad person, and
which has given you legal guilt before God, and you're just sinful in your nature. And any one of those, and you have all of them anyway.
Every time I sin, it's because I'm a bad person, so I did something wrong, and now I'm guilty.
And now you're guilty. And any one of those, even in isolation, even though you have all 3, is enough that you need salvation. You need justification.
Because God is holy.
Because God is
perfect,
holy.
and I am now a hell-bound sinner. So anyone who breaks the law at any point breaks it at every point. That's what that means.
That's what I would argue.
Okay.
And then I would say we see applications.
It's a line. I'm going to keep going because I just want to explain this. It's like a boundary. Once you cross that boundary, you're over it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what takes you over it.
Correct.
Some guy could kill 18 people.
Or you dishonored your parents.
You
when
just
you were 6.
dishonored your parents. You're both on the wrong side of the line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. So I think
in
that's
that
what
sense, they're equal.
In that sense,
they
they're
put
equal.
you in equal danger.
If you have righteous and unrighteous, then I would say, all sins put you in the category of unrighteous.
Okay.
You need cleaning, no matter what. But I think we see an application throughout the Bible that there's different levels of punishment for sin. We see that in the Old Testament when they're setting up
I wrote down.
Israel.
So you're going there.
I think we naturally intuit. So God says that the law is written on our hearts. That's why we don't have excuse even if we're not Israelites. Like even people who didn't have the law given to them had in our conscience seared the law of God.
Yes, we know there's a God. We know we're sinners,
and we know right from wrong.
In general.
And so I think our natural intuition on some sins being worse is correct, and I think you can argue that by seeing levels of punishment being different as God sets up Israel. And then I would say, even from general revelation, we see certain things as more in line with God's created order, and things that are completely out of line with God's created order. And I would use as an example there sexual immorality. Okay, so this is a stretch maybe, but some amount of sexual attraction to a woman is not sinful, I don't think.
Yeah, especially if it's your wife.
Because in the garden, Adam and Eve were without sin yet, and were instructed, as we covered recently, to multiply.
That's right.
And I would say, unless you
nothing
think,
to do with abacuses or calculators.
and unless you think Adam and Eve were just completely platonic automatons, were just going to do it out of obedience.
No way.
You would assume there's some amount of passion pre-fall.
Oh yeah.
Between men and women. So in some measure, attraction between heterosexual attraction between a man and a woman is good. But it can be corrupted by our nature. And that's where you get into regular sexual immorality between a man and a woman, outside of marriage, all that stuff. I put that in contrast to sexual attraction between a man and a man. It's of a different quality than sexual attraction that's bent between a man and a woman by their sinful nature.
Right.
There's nothing that's even in the same direction as God's created order in a man being attracted to another man. Right? There is no circumstance under which a man can live out his sexual attraction to another man and be within the confines of God's righteousness. Whereas with a man being attracted to a woman, there is. He can get married, and it can be wholesome and good and God ordained, and everything about it is wonderful.
So nothing like what Diddy did.
Well, right. And so that's where I would say, like,
we're just doing the Diddy check.
I would say our natural intuition that murdering a bunch of people is different than lying to my parents, I think is correct. And you see God demonstrate that by, like, we just covered the Noahic covenant the other day on the podcast, where Noah and his family is instructed, if man sheds man's blood, by man
shall his
blood be shed. That, like, the image bearers of humankind is held in higher esteem.
So killing someone gets you a worse punishment than stealing his cow.
Or killing his cow.
You
might be sinning against him by killing a man's property, his oxen. And then we see that there's different levels, because in the Old Testament you're required to replace his oxen if you kill his oxen.
And do something else, but not kill the man.
Yeah, but not kill the man. But if you kill the guy's brother, you're getting killed yourself.
Right.
And so I think that's a clear demonstration of levels of sin. And I would say, at the very least, and I almost hesitate to touch on this because I don't want to get into it. I don't really know the answer.
But you're going to do it anyway.
But I'm going to do it. At the very least, if there's one dichotomy, you have the unforgivable sin and all the forgivable sins. So at the very least, there's two tiers.
Yeah, at least two tiers.
There's
That's
at
a good
least
point.
2 tiers.
That's right.
We're
not going to define that now.
You're not going to define that now. But you have, just like you have the Creator, the Trinity, and then everything else is a created
Plus,
being.
we can have...
You have the unforgivable sin and all the others which are forgivable.
Right. So in the same way, we have at least one person we know sinned worse than another person. And that's because Jesus says to Pilate that the one who turned me over to you has the worst sin.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That's right.
And the word worse is a hierarchy.
That's right. And he also says, well, you took the Noahic flood,
Noahic.
Whatever. When God flooded the earth, he never said that the people before the flood were worse sinners than the ones after. In fact, he said the opposite. He said, I will never again flood the earth because the thoughts of all men's heart are evil from birth. He actually said, if I was to hold mankind to that standard constantly, I'd have to drown you all as you're born. He actually said, I'm going to overlook sin now because I'm going to pay the price. I made the example out of one group. And then he also said, it'll be worse for the cities of Israel who reject their Savior than for Sodom and Gomorrah in the judgment day. So Sodom and Gomorrah was so bad that he thought, you guys can't even be on the earth. You're just going to keep doing bad and nothing good comes of it.
Rain, fire.
So he sets them all on fire.
From the sky.
But then there's going to be a judgment day when they're raised up, and he's going to say, you guys are so bad you're going to go to hell for what you did, and you know that's going to be bad. But he's going to also say, but you know what? It's not as bad as the Jews in this town who rejected the Christ. So there are degrees of sin.
And so my strongest argument, which everybody knows, would be the Gospels themselves. Because we all hear meek and mild Jesus, he hangs out with sinners all the time. But he he is demonstrably You can demonstrate, that's what that word means. You can demonstrate that he is much harsher and direct and treats with no kid gloves
pastors,
the hypocritical religious
pastors.
elite. Yes.
He does not like bad
He doesn't
pastors.
go to the whorehouse and start calling
the Pharisees are there like, don't you dare say something about the anointed of the Lord.
Right. Like Jesus clearly handles different types of sin differently in his 3 years of ministry. And he seems to hammer pride, self-righteousness, self-aggrandizement. He treats them harsher than he treats other people.
Again, I'm going to go back to, I think the common thread is pride. He definitely blasts, but he goes after religious leaders.
Yeah.
He speaks in the prophets of, I'm going to slay my shepherds who did the wrong thing. And in the Gospels, those are the ones who get the biggest blast from him is pastors. He even takes it easy on Pilate, who ordered the greatest sin ever done, which is the death of the only innocent man. And he doesn't let him off the hook, but he says, well, the apostle, one of my pastors who turned me over, is going to be in a hotter spot in hell than you. Or he doesn't say that, but he says he's got it worse off. I'm going to go back to what I said about how I know to kill someone is worse, and it's obvious, than to murder them in your heart. Because of this law of love, Jesus said, do unto others as you would be done by. And I know in my own personal standard, if you just hate me, I wouldn't like that. If you murder me in your heart, I wouldn't like it.
I'd really prefer.
But I would say it much worse if you actually killed me. You know, people say, well, I already lusted after her, so might as well go commit adultery on my wife because I'm already guilty of adultery. No, the actual adultery is a worse sin. Now, I'm not measuring the heart, and I'm not measuring the legal guilt. I'm saying on this earth, you're doing a lot more damage. Like your wife, if you asked her, do you want your husband to lust after another woman on Thursday, June 12th? And she'd say, no. Okay. Would you rather have him do that, or once he's done, or would you rather have him sleep with another woman? And she says it has to be one or the other. What's she going to choose every time?
Yeah.
If it has to be one or the other, have him lust after her and repent. Because if he sleeps with her, I'm going to have a lot of trouble loving this man.
and
one's a worse sin.
I'm having trouble doing it from memory. I would want to go to that text, but that passage that you're referring to, where Jesus is talking about lusting in your heart or having
Sermon
anger
on the
in your
Mount,
heart,
Matthew 5, 6, 7.
I think that's a misapplication of what he's laying out, the standards of the kingdom.
That's right.
In that sermon.
That's right.
That's the same Beatitude sermon. The last will be first.
5:21. You've heard it said, "You should not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court." Legal guilt among men. But I say to you, everyone who's angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. You're already guilty.
Yeah, and I think that whole thing is developing. This is the standards of the kingdom of heaven.
That's right.
And so I think you're misapplying Jesus's admonition there.
If you say I can go ahead and...
If you said...
It's no worse to kill you than to hate you.
Correct.
Yeah. And in fact, it's funny because the way you put it is, I think is right. It's the standards of the kingdom. And if you take all three of the elements of sin, in the kingdom, we have our new bodies. We have the life of Christ in us. There is no sin nature. So there's nothing saying, there's no inner corruption to cause us to sin. There is no action.
There's no rebellion against the good law.
So we won't do that. And then therefore there's no legal guilt. In the kingdom, the beings who inhabit the kingdom, the citizens, will be free of all three aspects. And at the cross of Christ, we're set free from all three aspects because he paid the legal guilt and satisfied the anger of God towards us. He rose from the dead, giving us the promise of eternal life.
And breaking the power of sin.
And causing us to be able to be born again. And so we share his death in that our old nature died, and we share his life in that he rose, and the Holy Spirit
in his life
is the promise.
He had no wrong actions.
Right.
So he satisfied the living of the life with no wrong
Oh yeah,
actions.
and he did it in the same context we do. Like I think it'll be a cinch to have no wrong actions when the kingdom of God gets here. It's hard here, but he pulled it off. He pulled off Satan at 100% or 200 proof. 200 proof Satan came at him, right? 40 days in the desert, weak. He tempted him with fresh bread and power and all these things. Jesus was like, boom. What's it take to get, how much work does it take for Satan to get you or me to sin?
If I get less than 6 hours of sleep, I'm kind of a rattlesnake.
It takes like 2 proof, which would be 1% Satan. we're like giving in. So if God didn't protect us, we'd be toast. But he set his son without protection, and his son resisted, and then he left his son without protection from his anger. On the cross. Why hast thou forsaken me? It's not that when people say God turned his back, that's correct and incorrect. If you think it means he stopped loving them, or that the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Christ were not still united, which they always are because he's divine, but in his humanity, he was left alone to receive the full punishment that you and I deserve and to pay the price. That's what made his death worse than the guys next to him, because I'm sure the nails in their hands hurt just as much. So he set us free from all three. So anyway, all sin is bad. Some sins are worse.
Your intuition, which I wouldn't say is always true, I think is right here.
Yeah.
And I would say, applying the Sermon on the Mount in that way is incorrect.
And we'd also probably say as an application, if you ever get to thinking, well, I can go ahead and do that sin because it's not so bad, you've just been tricked. Because there's no such thing as a sin that's not so bad. Just because one's worse doesn't mean one's not so bad. They're all pretty dang bad. Look at it this way. If you set your hand on fire, who would say that's good? You say, well, I didn't set my whole body on fire. Okay, then why don't you just keep your hand on the stove all the time? It's not so bad. No, there's no such thing as a good setting a body part on fire, and there's no such thing as a sin that's not so bad. Anyway, I think we're done.
That's it.
We wore them out. If you made it to the end, I saw that light turn. Did you already turn me off?
No, she's just switching cameras.
She's a camera switcher.
Yeah.
If you made it to the end, good for you.
You'll get extra blessings in your life.
Oh, great. Now he's a Catholic priest. That's one of the sacraments, making it to the end of our podcast.
I do this a lot down in the office.
Dude, I saw this tweet. Some guy put a Thanksgiving for purgatory, and he had a picture of people like, I guess in what was purgatory, saying, because none of us can be good enough to get there. And I want to vomit over the doctrine of purgatory. What an insult to the cross of Christ, that it wasn't sufficient for your sins when you're going to pay for them yourself.
That's what they don't realize.
We're under grace, guys. That's it. We're done. Not gray skies. Wait a minute. We're not under gray skies. We're under grace, you guys.